Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Greece won the Greco-Turkish War. Everybody knows about Greece. In antiquity, Greece was known to have important cities, a great culture, smart people, and many famous wars, of course, like the Greco-Persian War. The Greeks were known to fight bigger enemies against all odds. But later on, when the Greeks found themselves within the Byzantine Empire, well, in there, after the fall of Constantinople, nothing really changed very much for them, except that they were under the rule of a foreign empire. And until then, they were erased for many hundreds of years. It was only in 1821 to 1829 where the Greeks managed to revolt successfully against the Ottomans, who themselves were slowly but surely declining. It was the first time for many years where the Greeks could put themselves again on the map. The Greeks got support from the outside, but not because the other countries wanted to be nice with them. No, they had interests. And if an independent Greece would suddenly exist, well, the balance of power, it would shift. And thus, some countries tried to get Greece to the sphere of influence. The Treaty of London in 1832 made of Greece a monarchy, which was at that time very obvious. And in 1833, Otto of Wittelsbach became the first modern Greek king. I'm saying modern because in this time, modern meant nothing else than the most recent of the new Greece. So we don't have any Byzantine king or any ancient Greek king who comes in there suddenly. Thus, the first modern Greek king. Greece was unstable for the following years, and Otto was later replaced by King George, who came from Denmark. He would later on raise his sons to become Orthodox. Greek expansion continued up until 1947, but the biggest blow came in 1923 with the Treaty of Lausanne. What if this never happened, and what if Greece won the Greco-Turkish War? Honestly, I was not really able to find reasons why Turkey won against Greece, but reading between the lines and making an interpretation of the historical events that happened, I found out that mainly Atatürk was a main cause why the Turks could win. He was a very uniting figure and a very popular leader, and up until, let's say, not even nowadays, but 10 years ago or 20 years ago, he was the most famous political figure of modern Turkey. Now, of course, with Erdogan, it might be a little bit different, but that's another discussion. The Greek forces, they were also overextended, which probably also led a lot to the decline and then later on to their loss against the Turkish. And also the local population, they probably didn't really welcome the Greeks because they were, at first of all, not Muslims, and second of all, they spoke a very different language, and thus, yeah, you can imagine what happened. The Italians and the Soviets also partially supported the Turks, another factor that contributed to the Turkish victory. However, it doesn't seem impossible for Greece to win. Just look at the Soviet Union, for instance. They lost to Poland. And Turkey just lost a war, the First World War, World War I. So they were already in a bad shape. So the point of divergence in here would be a mix of bad luck for Turkey and lack of support from the outside. A Greek victory would have a few consequences. Not all of Turkey would be annexed, obviously. Ataturk would probably be disposed and not be this popular figure for many years and the main political figure that would dominate Turkish policies for the next decades. And also Greece would be more stable and not suffer from a putsch or coup d'etat. Regionally there would be some problems, but Greece would most likely have a population exchange with Turkey and save many Greeks that were killed in later years during genocides from the Turkish side. Armenia could potentially become bigger, and we might even have an independent Kurdistan that could exist later on, but I think that at first autonomy for the Kurds would be the first option, as giving Turkey a really slim piece of their ancestral land, it would not really make much sense. And I think that the allies, or who else would make who else would mediate the peace talks, would not really like that the Greeks would take too much from Turkey. So the Turks, they would still have Kurdistan most likely, but it would be an autonomous Kurdistan. The Megali idea seemed to be almost completed, and the Greeks would now work with the Italians and the Brits on getting the Dodecanese and Cyprus. Dodecanese, they are these Aegean islands that used to belong to Italy for some time. The most popular one, I think, was Rhodos, if I'm not mistaken. Once the fascists under Mussolini would establish themselves, I think that most negotiations between Italy and Greece, they would probably stop, while Britain would not like to give Cyprus away for strategical reasons, but they would also not really like to alienate the Greeks because they could still be very useful allies. Special rights would thus be given to Greece at first, like about shipments or maybe some advancements in the Greek language for the Cypriot administration and many other things that would at first appeal to the local Greeks and also maybe to Greece itself. Turkey would suffer a lot. Ataturk leaned more towards socialism and nationalism, but if we take him out of the equation and consider the territorial losses and all the Turks that were deported from Greek territory into Turkish territory after the population exchange, we would have a very nationalistic Turkey. Turkey's first partners could be Italy and the Soviet Union. Armenia, being a bit bigger, could be split later on by the Soviets and the Turks, when all the attention was at Germany. World War II might be in the first stages similar as in OGL, until Italy would decide to mess up with Greece. And as we all know, it didn't end up really good, but now this will change a little bit. Turkey would open a new front, and with German support, the Greeks, they could be beaten, and I think even decisively. The next strategical goal for Turkey, at least, would be to take Iraq, and which they would probably manage to do. So a British-Soviet intervention could perhaps become an Arab or an Axis Soviet or Turkish Soviet intervention in Iran. The Axis could get enough resources, and with the Turkish support there could be some considerable gains in the Middle East or even North Africa due to the supply lines that would be deranged or cut off for the Brits, and new supply lines that would be established for the Axis. And I think that all of this would eventually lead to a more successful Plan Barbarossa from the point of view of the resources that they could manage to use, and thus the Axis might even be able to win the Second World War. An Allied victory would mean that Turkey would have to fail somewhere, be it in Iraq or Iran, and with a Soviet retaliation, not only would Eastern Europe be dominated by the Soviets, but probably also Turkey and some parts of the Middle East, but not all. The Kurds would adopt communism or more pro-Soviet opinion and get their independence within the former Turkish territory. The Greeks would be rewarded with the Dodecanese and probably get Cyprus from Britain for their efforts after some more years. Turkey would have to give some more territories to the Greeks, and they would become a Soviet puppet state. The Greco-Turkish border would be heavily armed, like the ones of the two Germanys, or both countries, Greece and Turkey, would be similar armed as the two Koreas, making the Cold War more tense, where Turkey or Greece would from time to time do some provocation. Greece, as a result, would get a lot of support from the West, and having a better quality of life than in OTL. And after the Cold War, the relations between both states could eventually go up, but I think a normalization between the Greco-Turkish relations, it would never be an option. While Kurdistan might become the next problem, keeping Syria, Iraq and Iran very nervous, because after the control of the Soviets, well, you would open up a can of worms in that region. And as we all know, the Middle East tends to be a very, a hotspot for conflicts. And if we add up independent Kurdistan, we will get even a more messed up situation in the Middle East. So I cannot really predict how this Middle East would look like if we would have now Kurdish American intervention in Iraq, if we would even after all get a Saddam Hussein in Iraq or an Assad in Syria. So these are consequences that we cannot really discuss, because it's too impossible to predict all of this with an independent Kurdistan. I think that politically this rump state of Turkey would be similar to former Soviet Union states, or more similar, like let's say Poland or even Slovakia or Hungary, politically speaking. But we could also get perhaps an Islamic revival, or not. It's also possible that maybe people will just stay atheistic but focus more on the nationalistic route. While Greece could be the most prosperous and the most stable country in the Mediterranean, with all the support that they got from NATO, then later on from the European Union, and also with the territories that they have and more resources that they can extract, and human resources as well. So I think that Greece would actually be in a much better spot, while Turkey would really be in a bad spot. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.